Hello, my friends. I'm Dr. Rachel Storms, and today I want to give you something most people never get in a short doctor's appointment. A clear, honest explanation of why your lungs feel heavier and more congested than they used to, and specifically which four foods are directly fueling that problem in ways that most patients are never told about. If you wake up every morning needing to clear your throat, if you feel like there is always something sitting in your chest, if you cough more than you used to and you have been told it is just your age, I want you to hear this. What you put on your plate in the evening has a direct and measurable effect on what your airways are dealing with by morning. And four of the most common foods in the diets of adults over 70 are making this significantly worse. Before we go any further, I want to name why this matters beyond comfort. After 70, the mucus-ciliary escalator, the system of tiny hair-like structures in your airways that moves mucus upward and out, has slowed considerably. The cilia beat less frequently, the mucus tends to be thicker, and the window between manageable congestion and a serious respiratory complication is narrower than it was at 50. Excess mucus that a younger body would clear in hours can sit in the airways of an older adult for days, creating conditions that predispose to bacterial overgrowth and pneumonia. Pneumonia in adults over 70 is not the same illness it is at 40. It is a leading cause of hospitalization and death in this age group, and it very frequently begins with exactly the kind of chronic low-level congestion that people have been dismissing as normal for months or years. I am not telling you this to frighten you. I am telling you because I want you to understand that changing what you eat is not a minor lifestyle adjustment in this context. It is a meaningful health intervention. I also want to give you a specific piece of information at the 15-minute mark of this video that surprises most of my patients, something about why congestion is often worse at night and in the morning that has nothing to do with the lungs themselves. It involves a condition most people have never heard of, and it explains why some people try every respiratory remedy without improvement because the root cause is actually coming from a different direction entirely. Stay with me through the full video. The first food is conventional dairy, and I want to be precise about the mechanism here because the relationship between dairy and mucus has been debated for decades in a way that has left most people either dismissing the connection entirely or eliminating all dairy without understanding what they are actually trying to avoid. The truth is nuanced. Controlled studies measuring objective mucus production have had mixed results, and dairy does not create mucus where none existed. What the evidence does support is that for a subset of people, particularly those with sensitivity to a specific milk protein called casein A1, dairy consumption increases mucus viscosity, meaning it makes the mucus that is already present thicker, stickier, and harder to move. The mechanism involves a peptide called beta-casomorphin 7, or BCM7, which is released when casein A1 is digested. BCM7 has been shown in cellular studies to stimulate mucin secretion from goblet cells in the respiratory lining. The result is not more mucus per se, but denser, less mobile mucus that the slowed cilia of an older adult's airways struggle to clear. In a 30-year-old with healthy ciliary function, this might be imperceptible. In a 75-year-old whose ciliary beat frequency has already declined by 20 to 30%, the same input produces a meaningfully different outcome. The practical test is simple. Eliminate conventional dairy for 3 weeks and observe whether your morning congestion changes. If it does, you have your answer. If nothing changes, dairy is probably not your primary driver. When you do make substitutions, the options with the cleanest profiles for respiratory purposes are unsweetened almond milk made from almonds and water only, and full-fat coconut milk. I want to specifically address oat milk here because it is extremely popular and widely marketed as a healthy alternative. Oat milk contains carbohydrates with a high glycemic index that can drive insulin spikes and systemic inflammation, and many commercial oat milks contain added oils that I will address when we get to food number 4. For respiratory purposes, oat milk is not the neutral substitute it is often assumed to be. Read the ingredient list before choosing it as your dairy replacement. The second food is refined sugar and white flour, and I want to connect these to your lungs in a way that goes beyond the generic anti-inflammatory messaging you have probably already encountered. The specific pathway I want you to understand is the relationship between blood sugar spikes, insulin, and the behavior of goblet cells in the respiratory tract. Goblet cells are the mucus-producing cells in your airway lining. They respond to inflammatory signals, and the insulin response triggered by refined carbohydrates is one of the most consistent drivers of the pro-inflammatory state that upregulates goblet cell activity. The analogy that helps patients visualize this is exactly the one I want you to hold. Think of your airways as pipes. Refined sugar and white flour are not just filling those pipes with debris, they are priming the pipe walls to produce more of their own sticky coating in response to every meal. Beyond the insulin inflammation pathway, there is a more direct mechanism involving a process called glycation. When blood glucose is elevated, glucose molecules attach to proteins and lipids throughout the body in a process that generates advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. AGEs activate the RAGE receptor, and RAGE activation is one of the most potent drivers of NFKB-mediated inflammation in the body, including in the respiratory mucosa. In the airways, this means more goblet cell activation, more mucus production, and more inflammatory thickening of the mucus already present. This is happening not once, but multiple times daily in anyone eating refined carbohydrates at every meal, which describes the dietary pattern of many older adults who have been told that low-fat, high-carbohydrate eating is heart-healthy. The inflammation that pattern generates in the airways is real and cumulative. The substitutions here do not require eliminating all carbohydrates. They require replacing the refined versions with alternatives that do not produce the same glycemic spike. Sweet potato instead of white potato. Quinoa or brown rice instead of white rice. True sourdough bread, made through genuine long fermentation with wild yeast instead of commercial yeast bread. The fermentation process in real sourdough partially breaks down the starch and significantly reduces its glycemic response compared to standard bread. And replacing sweetened snacks and desserts with mixed berries, which are low in sugar relative to most fruits and high in anthocyanins that have direct anti-inflammatory effects on the respiratory mucosa, is one of the most impactful simple changes for respiratory health after 70. Now I want to pause here and give you the piece of information I promised at the start, because we have reached the point in the video where it makes the most sense. Many older adults experience worsening congestion and throat clearing at night and first thing in the morning and assume the problem is in their lungs. In a significant proportion of these people, the actual driver is laryngopharyngeal reflux, sometimes called silent reflux, or LPR. This is a condition in which stomach acid and digestive contents travel upward past the esophageal sphincter and reach the larynx and the back of the throat. Unlike typical heartbeat, laryngopharyngeal reflux often does not produce a burning sensation in the chest. What it produces instead is exactly what many people attribute to a lung problem: a persistent need to clear the throat, a sensation of mucus at the back of the throat, a morning cough, and a feeling of something stuck in the airway. The body responds to the acid irritation of the delicate laryngeal tissue by producing mucus as a protective coating. That mucus is what people feel accumulating overnight and what they are clearing all morning. The body responds to the acid irritation of the delicate laryngeal tissue by producing mucus as a protective coating. That mucus is what people feel accumulating overnight and what they are clearing all morning. If your congestion is primarily nocturnal and morning dominant, if it is accompanied by a slightly hoarse voice in the morning or the sensation of post-nasal drip without an obvious allergic trigger, laryngopharyngeal reflux may be a primary contributor. Addressing it means addressing the dietary triggers and the meal timing that drives it, which overlaps considerably with the food changes we are discussing today. The third food is processed and cured meats. And this is the one I described at the beginning as the one that most confuses patients because of how it is marketed. The specific concern is nitrates and nitrites, the preservatives used in virtually all cured and processed meats, including bacon, ham, hot dogs, sausage, deli turkey, and most packaged lunch meats. When nitrates are consumed and metabolized, they can generate reactive nitrogen species in the lungs that have been shown in multiple epidemiological studies to worsen respiratory outcomes in older adults. A study published in the European Respiratory Journal found that high processed meat consumption was associated with a significantly increased risk of COPD exacerbations, and that this association remained after controlling for smoking history and other confounders. The mechanism appears to involve nitrate-induced oxidative stress in the respiratory epithelium that reduces mucociliary clearance and promotes airway inflammation. I want to address the turkey specifically because many older adults have been told that turkey is the healthier alternative to red processed meat, and many have made the switch believing they have eliminated this risk. Packaged deli turkey, turkey bacon, and turkey sausage all contain nitrates and nitrites at comparable levels to their pork counterparts unless they are explicitly labeled nitrate-free and verified to have used natural preservatives. The label says turkey. The ingredient list still says sodium nitrite. Read the ingredients, not the marketing. Genuinely nitrate-free options, including fresh, unprocessed poultry, fresh fish, eggs, and legumes, are the relevant substitutions for respiratory health. If you want a sandwich, roasting your own turkey breast and slicing it at home eliminates the nitrate exposure entirely. The fourth food is refined vegetable oils, which are present in an enormous proportion of packaged, processed, and restaurant-prepared foods, and which most people consume in far greater quantities than they realize. The relevant oils are the ones extremely high in omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids: canola, corn, soybean, sunflower, safflower, and cottonseed oils. These are the oils used in virtually all commercial cooking, in packaged crackers, chips, salad dressings, frozen meals, margarine, and most processed snack foods. The problem is not fat per se. The problem is the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids in the diet. In a traditional diet before industrial food processing, this ratio was roughly 4:1. In the modern diet of an adult consuming typical packaged foods, this ratio is commonly 15:1 or higher. Omega-6 fatty acids at high concentrations are metabolized into arachidonic acid, which is the precursor for prostaglandins and leukotrienes, two of the most potent pro-inflammatory mediators in the body, including in the respiratory tract. When the airways are chronically bathed in the downstream products of omega-6 excess, goblet cells are continuously stimulated, the inflammatory threshold of the urothelium and the respiratory epithelium drops, and the system sits in a state of low-level chronic inflammation that makes every respiratory challenge harder to manage. The correction is straightforward in principle, though it requires attention to labels in practice. Replace refined vegetable oils with extra virgin olive oil for cold use and for low to medium heat cooking, and with avocado oil for higher heat applications. Both have significantly better omega-6 to omega-3 ratios, and both have demonstrated anti-inflammatory profiles in respiratory tissue studies. When buying packaged foods, look for canola oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, and corn oil in the ingredient list, and avoid those products where possible. The improvement in omega-6 load from this single substitution, done consistently, is significant. Now let me give you the tea that I want you to be able to prepare today, because it addresses the inflammatory mechanisms of all four foods we discussed through a completely different route, and it takes under 3 minutes to make. The ingredients are fresh ginger, ground turmeric, black pepper, and lemon. Slice 4 to 5 thin rounds of fresh ginger root and place them in a mug. Add 1/4 teaspoon of ground turmeric and 1 generous pinch of ground black pepper. Pour 8 ounces of water just off the boil over the ginger and steep for 5 minutes. Squeeze the juice of half a lemon into the mug, stir, and drink warm. The ginger contains gingerols and shogols that directly inhibit prostaglandin and leukotriene synthesis in the respiratory tract, working against the same inflammatory mediators that omega-6 oils upregulate. Curcumin from the turmeric inhibits NF-κB, the master switch for goblet cell activation. The piperine in the black pepper increases curcumin bioavailability by a substantial margin, as I described in my video on the 3 superfoods. The lemon contributes vitamin C and bioflavonoids that support the structural integrity of the respiratory lining. Consumed in the evening after implementing the 4 dietary changes, this tea provides a direct anti-inflammatory input that compounds the benefit of what you removed from your diet. I want to close with a practical note about expectations and sequence. Removing inflammatory foods and adding the tea produces a gradual change, not an overnight transformation. The first thing most people notice within 1 to 2 weeks of consistent implementation is a change in the quality of the morning congestion rather than its complete absence. It becomes less dense, easier to clear, and the morning routine takes less time. By week 3 to 4, the frequency and volume typically begin to decrease. Full benefit, in terms of a genuinely meaningful reduction in chronic congestion, generally requires 6 weeks of consistent dietary change. The body is not working against you. It is simply a system that took months or years to reach its current state of inflammation, and that responds to correction over a similar time frame. If you found this video useful, and you know someone who is always fighting a cough, always clearing their throat, share this video with them. That chronic congestion is not inevitable. It is not just getting older. In many cases, it is a direct consequence of specific dietary inputs that can be changed. And if you want to understand why your energy may feel low, even after addressing your respiratory health, my video on the 7 signs of B12 deficiency is the next piece of the picture. Without adequate oxygen delivery from healthy lungs, and without adequate B12 for cellular energy production, fatigue is not going to resolve no matter how well you sleep. Watch that video next.